Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is a Python project for DevOps engineers. You can use this project in your resumes. You can use this project for explaining to the interviewer when they ask you about practical knowledge of Python and how did you use Python for your cloud infrastructure or AWS environment. Now, what are we waiting for? Let's quickly jump onto the video and understand what is this project and what is the project description. So last week, I shared the project idea. It is called as AWS Ninja. I gave this name to the project. You can change the name as per your requirement. It does not matter that it has to be AWS Ninja or something else. Now, what is the project description? I will give you a very basic example before I jump on to explaining the description. So as a cloud engineer, it is, or as a DevOps engineer, it is one of your goals, or it is one of your one of your job responsibilities to maintain the infrastructure according to the compliance of the organization. Now, it might be complicated. I'll give you very layman terminology. Let's say someone creates a EBS volume of type GP2. So in EBS, you can create volume of type GP2 or GP3. Let's say someone has created an EBS volume of type GP2, but your organization wants all the EBS volumes to be of type GP3. Why? Because GP3 has better performance when compared to GP2. It's quite fast and there are other things. So that's why one of the organizational rules is that anyone who creates EBS volume on the AWS accounts, it should be of type GP3. But how do you do that? Let's say you create documents to it, you share the knowledge, you explain everyone that EBS volume should be of type GP3, but still someone who is joining new or unexpectedly, unfortunately, they have created EBS volume of GP2. Now, how do you handle this scenario? Because you are the cloud engineers, you are responsible for it. So what you can do is you can use this project that I'm going to explain, and you can convert this EBS of type GP2 automatically to EBS of type GP3. Now, this is just an example. The options for this are endless. You can even consider this as an EC2 instance. Let's say someone creates an EC2 instance with 100 GB 100 GB RAM and 100 CPU. As a cloud engineers, you should restrict such actions, right? What if there are 10 engineers who keep on creating EC2 instances with large resources? Then, you know, your organization is affected by these developers or these persons who are creating this infrastructure. So to block these things or to ensure such things are not taken place, you need to use this project. And this project is basically ensuring that you maintain the AWS infrastructure or cloud infrastructure according to the compliance of your organization. So that's what I mentioned here. As a cloud engineering team, we can take care of we can take care of we take care of AWS environment and make sure it is in compliance with the organizational policies. For example, we trigger a Lambda function when AWS Elastic Block Store, that is EBS volume, is created. What we do is we verify if it is of type GP3. If it is of not type GP3, then we automatically convert the GP2 type to GP3 type. And how do you do that? We use AWS CloudWatch in combination with AWS Lambda functions. And inside the AWS Lambda functions, we use Python as scripting language. Okay, so this is the big picture, and now let's jump on to understand how to do this, what are things required to implement it, and we will also do the same example that I've shown you, right? I will try to keep this video as informative as possible. At the same time, I will try to restrict the time as well, because many people would engage if the video is small, sweet and informative. No problem. So firstly, let's start creating an EBS volume of type GP2, and let's see how it gets converted automatically to GP3. But before that, we need to do some prerequisites. That is, we need to create a Lambda function. We need to create AWS CloudWatch and integrate both AWS CloudWatch and AWS Lambda function, so that Lambda function gets triggered by CloudWatch when EBS volume is created. So I hope you understood the project. What am I going to demonstrate and what is your role as cloud engineers? And similarly, you can try thinking different options. Like I gave example of EBS. I also gave example of EC2. You can think of S3 buckets. You can think of RDS. You can think of Kubernetes, that is EKS. N number of possibilities, and this project scope is endless because number of resources on AWS, number of policies that your organization can build around that resources, the compliance rules that your organization can build. As cloud engineers, you have to take care of ensuring that every resource is following or is according to the compliance. Now, without wasting any time, what I'll do first is, this is my AWS console. I hope you are seeing the right screen. Perfect, you are seeing the right screen. Now, what I'll do is I'll start with a basic Lambda function. I'll not write the Lambda function immediately, but I will just, what I'll do is I'll just create a basic Lambda function. Okay. So take a new tab and search for Lambda. So this is the Lambda function here. And let's create a new Lambda function. Okay. Perfect. Create function. What we will do is we will call this Lambda function as EBS volume check. Okay. So I'll just call it as EBS volume check because we are verifying the EBS volume. Then let's use Python 3. I'll not change any of these things. Let's use the default execution role itself, or if you want, I can also create an new AWS role. Okay, but for the purpose of keeping the video very simple, let's use the basic Lambda function that is created here. And what I'll do is I'll update the permissions of this role, because there are many beginners who are watching this video. I don't want to confuse them by creating a lot of resources. Okay, but if you are already well versed with AWS, or you have acquaintance with AWS, what you can do is, instead of using this default Lambda role that AWS creates for the Lambda function, you can also use a IAM role by creating IAM role by yourself. I'll tell you what permissions are required. Okay, so this is a very basic Lambda function that AWS has given us. Okay, so there is no code related, there is no Python, even a single line of Python code is not available here related to our function, because this is a default value. So if you check, this function can be executed, like you can click on test and provide the event name as test event, click on save, and once you run this, you will notice that the Lambda function is running. So this is a basic check that you have to do to ensure that your Lambda function is working. Perfect. Now let's go to CloudWatch. So search for CloudWatch. You have to be very clear with what you are doing. Only then you will understand this entire process. That's why I initially try to explain about the project. So we are going to the AWS CloudWatch. And what I will do is I will configure a rule in AWS CloudWatch, which will trigger the Lambda function. Okay. So what we need to do here is go to this section here. Under the events, you will see something called as rules. Click on that. And after that, click on create rule, because we need to create a new role. New rule, and select the name of the service. So in my case, the name of the service is, let's see if we have EBS. If not, we can go with EC2. Perfect. What is the event type? So the event type is volume creation, right? So let's put it as EBS volume notification. Do you want to specify any specific event? Like for example, do you want to specify creation of volume? Yes, because the scope of my project is only for creation of volume. Always ensure that whenever you create any resource in AWS, the thing that you have to keep in mind is least privilege or zero privilege. That means you need to try to restrict the actions, you need to try to restrict the permissions, everything to the extent of your project. If you go beyond that, then you are creating a security violation. Any volume ARN or specific volume ARN. Right now, I don't know the ARN of the EBS volume that is getting created, that's going to be created. And this project should have any volume ARN, because any volume that is created, your CloudWatch and the Lambda function should monitor it. So that's why I'll keep it as any volume ARN. Now, what you can do is you can also add a target. Okay, so what is the target? EBS volume check, the function that I have written, the Lambda function that we wrote, is the how do I say that? Is the Lambda function. Again, do you want to configure any versions for your Lambda function or anything, etc.? No, I don't want to. So I'm fine with it. And I don't want to add any additional target. There is only one target for my function. Okay, so let's click on configure details. Now, what is the name of your rule definition? Let's use the same name called EBS volume check. Description, we can give the same project description. Okay, in your organization, it is very important to provide the descriptions. Okay, so for now, I'm providing the same project description, but you need to modify accordingly. Okay, now click on create rule. I hope it is clear on what we have done till now. All that we did is we have configured the Lambda AWS CloudWatch to trigger the Lambda function when there is a volume creation event. Now, before I write the code for verifying the GP2 and converting it into GP3, what I need to check is I need to verify if my CloudWatch is able to access the Lambda functions, right? So for that, I can do a dummy run. Okay, what I'll do is I'll create a dummy Lambda function. I'll create a dummy EBS volume. Go to your EC2 dashboard. Volumes are under EC2 dashboard. See, you can find something called Elastic Block Store. Move to volumes, and inside the, here, what you will do is you can create a volume. Looks like I already have a volume. Let me delete that. Make sure you delete the volumes after you create. Okay, something is going wrong here. Perfect. Delete volume. Have deleted the volume. Now let's create a new volume. And the expectation is the Lambda function should get triggered. And see here, by default, the type is of GP2. But right now your Lambda function does not have that logic to convert it to type GP3 because we have not written any Python code. But if you look here, the type is GP2. This is the default type. Awesome. Now let's just queue it a minute because Lambda function has to trigger the CloudWatch has to trigger the Lambda function. So now let's go to the log groups and see if the Lambda function is triggered and executed. It's just taking a minute. Perfect. Now you will notice the log group for Lambda functions and specifically to your Lambda function. Okay, I think there is some delay. Just a second. Okay, so there was some delay, but if you go to the CloudWatch log groups, now I can see that there is a log stream here, or there is a log group here. If we go to this log group, let us see what is the latest log group. Okay, so this is the latest log group, and if I go into this one, I will notice that there is a Lambda function that got triggered. Okay, so this is the Lambda function that got triggered, and what does it do? It is a very basic Lambda function and it does not execute anything related to your EBS volumes, but this is just for verification that my CloudWatch, when there is a EBS volume that gets created, triggers the Lambda function. Okay, nothing more than that. So my verification, the basic verification has passed. Now what I'll do is I will go and write the Python code for converting the EBS volume of type of type GP2 to type GP3. So let's do that here. The very first thing that you need to do is understand how Lambda functions works. So in Lambda function, there is a default function called Lambda handler. That's the one that gets triggered, or that's the one that gets executed as soon as your Lambda function is called. Now you can modify this. You can change this Lambda handler in the configuration and you can provide any custom name. And what is this event and what is this context? So event and context are provided by the invoking function, invoking resource. Now CloudWatch is invoking this Lambda function. So the event is the CloudWatch event. Okay, so this JSON event is basically a JSON is provided by CloudWatch. And what do we have inside this event? You can verify that. What you can do is just provide this detail here called print event. Okay, so just say print event for you to understand what is the event. Okay, what is this JSON that CloudWatch is providing to the Lambda function when EBS is created. Okay, so just click on deploy. Every time you make a change, it is recommended to uh, deploy the new change or use Control S. Now test it. Perfect. Lambda function is in good shape. Now test it from the CloudWatch so that you understand what is this event. Okay, so again, what you need to do for that is remove this EBS volume that you have created and create a new one, because your CloudWatch triggers the Lambda function only when a EBS volume is created. So delete the volume and let me create a new volume. Always make sure you are deleting the volumes. So now again a new volume is created, and wait for a minute. Your log group will be updated, and but this time in the log group you will get the full details of your EBS volume that is created, and this full details are sent to the Lambda function. As a cloud engineer, you will use this event details and you will write the logic in your Python code for handling the event and updating the EBS volume of type GP3. So we are just 5 minutes away to complete this project. Stay tuned. This is the log group. Now you will notice that there is a new log stream. Okay, so this is the latest one that I have, and if I go into this one, see, you have the complete details of the EBS volume that is created. You can search. So this is the volume name that CloudWatch log groups tells us. Let us verify. Perfect. You can verify that the volume is same. So this is the JSON data. Now what is this JSON data? Let us investigate. For that, what you need to do is take a online JSON formatter. Any JSON formatter is fine. Just search for JSON formatter. Okay, so I've just opened a JSON formatter, provide the details here, process, and you will get the entire details. So this is the same details that CloudWatch is providing to the Lambda function. Okay, so you can assume that, let's say you are a beginner to Python, you can assume that this function is translated something into this. Okay, event is equals to the JSON data. Now this is just for your understanding. Okay, you don't have to put this thing, but just understand that this is how this function is converted. Okay, the event is populated with these details. So you don't have to provide this thing now because event is already provided by the AWS CloudWatch. So now what are the things inside it which you can use? The only thing that I would need is the name or the ID of the Lambda function. Okay, so this is something that I need so that I can convert this volume ID or the volume of this ID to type GP3. Now, how do I extract this information? Okay, firstly, I think most of you know that in Python, the most popular package that you would use is Boto3. Now I will use Boto3, the Python module, to convert this volume to type GP3. But before that, I have to extract this one. So for extraction, I will write a new Python function. Okay, so I'll just call it as very simply, let's call it as Python function of name. What name should we provide? Let's provide the name as extract volume ID. Okay, you can provide any name. Just take name as input. And now what I'll do is inside this, I will write the Python code related to this one. Okay, so I already have this handy so that we don't waste a lot of time. So I just change the name of it to get volume ID from ARN. Okay, so what we are doing here is we are firstly extracting this entire ARN, and from this ARN, what I am doing is I am extracting this volume ID. Okay. Now, how do I extract this one? You know that this is a JSON information, right? So why I put this one here? We don't need this one, but just for your understanding, I have this one here. But once we complete the function, I'll remove this block because it's very difficult to go back to the log group and always show you this information. What I did is I have this information here, but once the function is done, I'll remove it. So get volume ID from ARN. We are taking the volume ARN as an input. That means we are taking this as input. But to take this as input, you have to pass this ARN to the function, right? To pass this ARN to the function, firstly, what I'll do is I'll parse this JSON. How do you parse the JSON in Python? All that you need to do is, let's call this as volume ARN. Okay. To parse this, what I can do is simply volume ARN is equals to event of what is the function here, resources of 0. Okay. Why I'm doing 0? Because I just want the first entry. That's it, nothing more than that, right? I am just taking the first entry and I'm calling it as volume ARN, or you can also call it as resource ARN or whatever you would like to. Now I have this information, right? Now I will pass this volume ARN to this function and retrieve the volume ID. Okay. So for that, what I can do is call this function. Let me call this as volume underscore ID, and I will pass this information to the function. And let's pass this one called volume ARN. So now you will get the volume ID. Okay. So you have the volume ID. What you need to do next is use this Python module called Boto3 and convert this thing, the volume of type GP2 to type GP3. So for that, you need to again go to your browser and search for Boto3 modify volume. Okay. Because you are trying to modify the volume. Go to the Python documentation, I mean the Boto3 documentation, and you have the very clear instructions here. Just copy this instruction. Where is this? Here. Perfect. And what I'll do is I'll just paste it here. Format it. Do I need this? No, I don't want to talk anything related to dry run. Do I need the volume ID? Absolutely yes. Just copy the volume ID here. Do I need the size? Right now, I'm not bothered about it. What is the volume type that you need? I need the volume type as GP3. Okay. So what you are doing here, you are using the Lambda function. You are using the Boto3. You haven't created the client. Don't worry, I'll tell you how to create the client. But I am using the modify volume function, and I am trying to convert the volume of this ID to type GP3. I don't want any of these things. So let me remove. And finally, I just have to create a client. So what is this client? So client in Boto3 is nothing but like Boto3 can handle all the AWS resources or most of the AWS resources, but you want to use a client for your specific resource. Okay. So what I'll do for that is, again, you can go to the Boto3 documentation. You have to understand that which type of resource is it. So EBS basically falls under EC2. So I am going to create an EC2 client where I call it Boto3 dot client EC2. Okay. Now, if you are dealing with some other resource, then let's say you are dealing with S3, then it will be S3 client. If you are dealing with something else, then you have to create that something else client. And that's it. We are technically done. Now let me try to remove this thing. I'll try to keep this Python function as minimalistic as possible. I don't want to use event. Okay. Now remove this. Perfect. If you want to add comments, then it is very good. You can add n number of comments so that your function is much more readable. But let's try to understand what I've written here. One is import JSON is not required because we are not doing any JSON related formatting. I have imported the Boto3 functionality. I have imported the Boto3 module, and this is the get volume ID from ARN. This is the volume ARN that I am trying to, the volume ID that I am trying to retrieve from the volume ARN. So how am I doing it? Basically, I am using this function called get volume ID from ARN, and I'm passing the volume ARN. So how did I pass the volume ARN? I read the event from the log group. I used the JSON formatter. I understood where the volume ID is, and I got that basic information. After that, you can basically use the Boto3 client for EC2 and modify the volume. Now, as soon as I deploy it, and if I create a test volume, it should work fine. But one thing that is left is you have to grant the permissions to this IAM role. Why? Because the IAM role will not have permissions to access the EBS resource. So for that, what I'll do is quickly go to somewhere here. What you can do is duplicate this tab and go to IAM. Every time I open a tab, it gets slow, but that's fine. Let's try one more time. Cool. IAM. Oh, sorry. I need to search here, not there. My bad. So go to IAM, and there will be an existing role for your EBS. I just try to add or attach it with a policy to handle the EBS. Now that will be your final step. After that, I'll show you practically. We are just 2 minutes away. You will see that the volume is converted to type GP3. Sorry, again, it's a bit slow. Click on the 3 roles. You will find the role for yourself. This is the role, EBS volume check hyphen role hyphen this random string that is prefixed, sorry, that is suffixed, add permissions, attach policy, or create inline policy. You should go with create inline policy. What happened here? So I think it's getting refreshed. Okay, choose the service. So the service should be of type EC2, as you already know. Okay, so what exactly in EC2 are you looking for? Okay, so in EC2 there will be several actions, and you should find the correct action. Like I always tell you, don't provide permissions that are not required. Just for the demo you can do that, but in your organization when you are doing it, do not provide more permissions. Okay, so select the EC2, that is of services of type EC2, and then what you will do is go with the action. For now, because of the demo, you can just select all EC2 actions, but go with expand all and select the permissions that are required. In your case, you will mostly need permissions related to list volume, describe volume, and then you will need permissions related to just few things. Probably you don't even have to describe the volume, but you have to just modify the volume. So these are the permissions that you will require. Let me review the policy, and there is some error. The policy contains an error. Okay, let's see what it is. Okay, I think it's better to restrict the permissions related to volume. So now I choose volume here, and let's provide the permissions that are required. Describe volume. I don't think even describe is required, but let's provide the permissions related to describe and modify volume. Okay, because we are basically doing the modify volume. And do you want to provide anything related to resource ARN? No, I want to do it for all the resources because my function has to deal with all the resources. Now finally review the policy and just create the policy. Okay, let's provide the same name, EBS volume check. Create policy. Perfect. The policy is created. Now let's get ready for the final step where I will delete this volume, create a new volume, and we will see that the volume is converted to type GP3. Let's delete this volume. Perfect. Create the volume. I'm not going to change anything. Click on the create volume. If the Lambda function is successfully executed, we will notice that the type is converted to GP3. If it is not executed, then let's try to see what is the error and let's try to fix it. Okay, it's still of type GP3. Let us see if it is converted to type of GP3. If not, like I told you, let's try to fix it. Final check. I'm hoping it will pass. Let's see the volume type. Okay, it's still GP2. Let's go to the CloudWatch logs and see what has happened. Okay, so this is the CloudWatch logs. Let's go to the log groups one more time and let's see the latest log group. If there is any issue, we should be able to fix it. This is a volume group, and this is the latest volume stream. This is updated right now. Let's open the volume group. See, there is an error here. It says resources is not defined in traceback. Okay, so what is this resources? Let's see. Okay, it clearly says that in line number 13, my Lambda function is not working. Perfect. There is no problem. Let's go to the Lambda function and let's try to fix it. What is line number 13 here? It says event resources. Okay. So if you check the event, I have somewhere this in the JSON, right? Says inside the event, you have something called as resources. Am I wrong with it somewhere? Okay. I think I got it. It should be inside the single quotes, right? So see, we do kind of silly mistakes. Now let's try to deploy it one more time. And it's time for one more attempt where I will delete this existing volume and recreate a new one. Delete. Okay, let's create a new volume. Create volume one more time. We are giving our second attempt and hopefully this time it will pass. Again, if it doesn't pass, you don't have to worry. Just like I showed you, go to the log group, try to identify the error. It's always good if we fail in the demo because people who are watching the video, they'll be able to understand where exactly is the implementation going wrong and how to fix it. So I refreshed it. Now let us see if the volume is of type GP3. Loading volumes. Okay, it's still on GP2. Probably we did one more mistake. This is the latest one. Let us see where did we go wrong again. Name client is not defined. Okay, so it says that the client dot okay, because I was doing it live, I just did some very simple mistakes. It should be ec2 underscore client because we have defined it as ec2, and this time I'm very sure it will pass. Let's delete this one. So this is our third attempt. I hope the subscribers who are watching this or the viewers, you are learning from the mistakes that I'm doing. Now I've created the volume, and this time I'm pretty sure if I refresh this, this should be of type GP3. Final check. GP3. You can play this video at 2x speed so that you don't get bored while watching it, but we are doing the practical implementation and it is very good always to learn from the mistakes. Okay, still GP, very strange. Is it that it did not get refresh or ah, okay. So EC2 client, right? What is a mistake it says here? Where did I provide EC client? Is it not EC2 underscore client? Probably it's not well deployed. Line number, what does it say? Says line number 18, ECC client. No, I think it's not well read. So let's try to redeploy this. EC2 underscore client. Perfect. I think it's issue with caching, not from our side. Okay. Now I hope finally it will pass. Last time was a caching issue. I don't think it's issue from our end, but let's try to see one more time. So I don't want to edit this part because people who are watching it, you can learn from the mistakes. So I'm not interested in editing and I'll post it as is without making any changes. So if again it is not converted to type GP3, probably there is some issue with, yeah, perfect. GP3. So this is it. And I hope you like the demonstration where we have seen how to use this function, how to use this project called AWS Ninja. Like I told you, I'll put this entire thing in the description so that you can follow the video. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you found this useful, and the demo part which failed initially, learn from that mistakes and try to implement this with multiple examples. I'll see you in the next video. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe to the channel. Take care, everyone. Bye.